Now, Ukraine says it has destroyed another Russian warship in the Black Sea. The military says the vessel was destroyed off the Crimean peninsula, which Moscow illegally annexed 10 years ago. Kyiv says naval drones sank the Caesar Kunikov, a large landing ship, in Ukrainian territorial waters. It is the second time in 2 weeks that Ukrainian forces claim to have sunk a Russian ship in the Black Sea. DW's Alexandra von Namen asked the NATO Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg, about the destruction of that Russian warship.
Armed forces said today that they destroyed a large Russian ship. I guess you cannot comment on that, but could you tell us how significant the Black Sea campaign of the Ukrainians is, especially when we consider that there are intelligence services, for instance, the Norwegian one, saying that the Russians now have the upper hand on the battlefield? Thank you.
The Ukrainians have been able to inflict heavy losses on the Russian Black Sea fleet. They have actually been able to push the Black Sea fleet away from the western part of the Black Sea. And this is a great achievement, a great victory for the Ukrainians. The fact that they've been able to push away the Russian Black Sea fleet and open a corridor, so they now are able to export grain and other commodities to the world market. Few believed this was possible just a few months ago, but now actually the export of grain from Ukraine takes place even without an agreement with Russia. So this the skills and the competence of the Ukrainian armed forces. This is first and foremost a result of what they do, their ingenuity, their skills, their bravery of the Ukrainian armed forces. But of course, help and support from NATO allies is also important. I think it also demonstrates that, of course, what goes on along the front line is important. And we are all disappointed that the offensive that was launched by the Ukrainian forces last year didn't achieve more progress, advances. At the same time, we should not forget that even though the front line has not changed, the Ukrainians have been able to actually attack behind the Russian lines, both on land, destroying command and control, arms depots, and important also Russian capabilities, including aircraft, but also continue to destroy parts of the Russian Black Sea fleet, and this just shows the skills of the Ukrainian armed forces.
NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg there. Now, Mike Martin is with the War Studies Department at King's College London, and I asked him earlier how big a blow the sinking of this Russian warship would be.
Well, I think in and of itself, the sinking of a single, I mean, this was a landing craft, is not a huge deal. But when you add it up to all the other ships that have been sunk, I mean, this is the second ship this month that the Ukrainians have sunk in the Black Sea. And this pattern is starting to hit home and is starting to cause the Russians severe problems.
The NATO Secretary-General, we just heard from him there, Jens Stoltenberg, he's called this a great victory for Ukraine. So why is this a crucial achievement for Kyiv?
Well, this is the Ukrainian Navy that was almost completely captured by the Russians in the 2014 taking of the Sevastopol port in Crimea. And what they've managed to do since then is sink 17,000 tons of Russian shipping. That's 150% more than the Russians have managed to sink of Ukrainian shipping. So for a country effectively without a navy to be able to sink 150% more of the shipping of one of the largest navies in the world really is an extraordinary achievement.
So it appears Ukraine is finding it easier to put Russia on the back foot in the Black Sea than it is on dry land. Why is that? What are the reasons behind that?
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, obviously the Ukrainian offensive last year didn't really achieve what it was meant to achieve. And that's because the Russians had some time to be able to dig in. So all along the front, they've dug in strong anti-tank ditches, minefields. And the reality is it's easier to defend than to attack. And so that is why we see that the war on land stalemated. But of course, in the maritime domain, as we've seen with this attack, just a few drones and you can have quite a large effect on ships that are much harder to defend.
And how do you expect Russia to respond to this?
Well, I actually don't think that there's much they can do in the maritime domain. I mean, previously ships have been sunk and they haven't done very much. Usually what Russia does when Ukraine manages a spectacular like this is they just do a slightly larger air raid over civilian targets, so over Kyiv or over Kharkiv. And that's their way of making the point. And so I would expect tonight, over the next week or so, we'll see slightly heavier bombardment of civilian areas by the Russians.
OK. Now, the Ukrainian army has a new commander-in-chief. He's called the situation on the front lines extremely complex and stressful. He said Russian troops are increasing their efforts. They've got more manpower. So how crucial, speaking about US military aid now, how crucial is US aid for Ukraine's counteroffensive?
So obviously we've seen the freezing or the drawing down of US aid. There is still other aid going in from European countries. The UK recently signed off £2.5 billion of aid over the next year or so. And so there is other aid. But the reality is, and this is true within NATO, it has been true for decades, that the US is the indispensable partner. And part of that's psychological. So when European countries see the US putting its hand in its pocket or delivering artillery, they feel, yes, actually, we can do this because we're backed up by the Americans. And then part of it is just raw industrial power. The US is able to turn out things like artillery shells and anti-aircraft missiles at a much greater rate than European countries. So it is very important.
Mike, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much. That's Mike Martin, military analyst from King's College London.
Thank you.